Yeah, I honestly had to look up what prevarication means, and apparently, according to Google's crappy AI thing, it means the act of avoiding the truth or saying something that is not exactly what you think. Now, what does that have to do with Halo? Well, it is the title of a mod for Halo 3 ODST. It's a campaign mod with about 3 to 4 hours of content. So, short answer to your first burning question, is it good? Should I go play it? I would say yes. I think it's good, and I think you should check it out if it interests you. The Weird Unicorn VTuber's got you covered. There's a link in the description if you want to go check it out. For a longer and slightly more nuanced answer with bundles of critique and also snapshots of some gameplay, well, stay tuned. Honestly, the best thing about having your own YouTube channel is you just sort of get to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I absolutely love talking about Halo. So, without further ado, I'm Extra Galactic Unicorn. Let's get into it. All of the clips that you're seeing and will see in this video are from my Twitch stream. If you're interested, please go check it out in the description below. So to introduce the mod, Halo Prevarication is a story in an alternate timeline of the Halo universe. It is a timeline in which the Flood are ultimately winning, and it is our job as an ODST to try and slow them down as best we can. Spartans are very rare indeed, and the Flood is an ever-encroaching menace which never seems to stop. And in this particular version of events, we get to see what may very well be the twilight years of humanity. The mod has a very grim and dark atmosphere, and it introduces a lot of horror elements to Halo's storytelling. It does a great job of adding new enemies and new weapons to the Halo sandbox. And these new additions really help give the mod character and help it stand out against the standard Halo sandbox. But let's cover each of these elements one at a time. First of all, let's talk about gameplay. As I mentioned, Halo Prevarication comes with a number of custom weapons and enemies which add to the Halo sandbox. The big piece of critique that I have to levy against that is when you add something to a sandbox like Halo's, you need to understand the impact of not just adding that one particular item, but also the impact that that has on every other piece of equipment in the whole sandbox. This is actually a really interesting topic considering Halo's history, so let's delve into a bit more detail here. It seems that the main design philosophy ever since Halo 2 has been that human and Covenant weapons have some degree of design parity when it comes to their battlefield role. That said, each weapon is unique in how it approaches and handles that battlefield role. One big example of this is the SMG and the plasma rifle, both rapid-fire close-quarter weapons which are designed for taking down shields. Another iconic matchup would be the Covenant carbine and the battle rifle, both being mid to long-ranged rifle weapons which are really good at getting headshots. Therefore, I was a little bit concerned when Halo Prevarication added the designated marksman rifle from Halo Reach into Halo 3 ODST. And that's not because I didn't want a cool new weapon to play around with in the Halo sandbox. However, if they did add it, then I would suggest that they needed to make it different or interesting enough from the battle rifle or the Covenant carbine to be an interesting addition. Fortunately though, this is no Halo 4 light rifle or whatever the hell that thing was called. The designated marksman rifle doesn't actually come with a scope, which actually makes it quite challenging to aim with. It also does a bit more damage than the standard Covenant carbine or the battle rifle, making it a high skill and high reward weapon. I both love and I hate this gun. Largely, this describes all of the weapons which Halo Prevarication adds. They're all interesting, and they're all ultimately just doing their own thing, which makes Halo Prevarication a novel experience, and that's to be commended. There's maybe two exceptions to this rule, and that would probably be the two SMG variants. I can't really find a difference between them in my playtesting. There might be one that I just didn't notice, but I didn't notice while I was playing. And the second one would be the golden gun. Honestly, no shade, it just feels kind of out of place and a little silly in a horror mod, honestly. Talking about enemies, there's a bunch of new and unique enemies in the mod as well. The problem with fighting the Flood in Halo, though, is they're just not the best enemies in Halo. I mean, that award hands down goes to the elites. Fighting the Flood is more like fighting zombies than anything else. They charge at you and try and overwhelm you, and at the end of the day, you just end up backpedaling until you run out of ammunition. Enemies in Halo Prevarication, though, do a bit more skirmishing than I'm used to, and there's new variants of Flood like Shield Flood as well, which kind of keep you on your toes a little bit. All in all, I don't really have a lot of bad things to say because I think they just add a lot more needed variety to the Flood arsenal than anything else. You could make the argument that some of these designs are just reskinned versions of already existing enemies. You could also make the argument that they're not the most creative designs either. That said though, given a choice between this and fighting combat forms for 4 hours, I would choose this in a heartbeat. At the bare minimum, they've not gone and created another library, and that should be applauded. The mission and level design is where I have a bit more to say, I think. Just looking at these from a gameplay perspective first, most of these levels are reused assets from Halo 3 ODST or Halo 3. They're dressed up for the Flood invasion, of course, but ultimately they play just as well as they did on the base game. Largely, the mod creators make great use of these spaces. That said, however, sometimes when you go off the beaten path, there's a definite lack of clutter or props just lying around. However, these places aren't really on the golden path, and I'd rather that a free mod team focus on core gameplay than just adding random clutter down some back streets, so I kind of forgive them for that. The more pressing issues with level design occur when the mod team are not just reusing Halo 3's maps though. Some sections definitely have technical issues. For example, these stairs are not very friendly to walk up. If you're looking at this footage right now, you can see I'm having to sort of jump in order to actually get up these stairs. You don't walk up them like you'd sort of expect. The section right after this as well is not particularly well laid out. It's ultimately just a corridor with a crap ton of Flood at the end, and it's not a particularly interesting battlefield in any shape or form, really. The worst section, however, definitely comes from the reuse of one of Halo 3's own multiplayer maps. The start of this map is incredibly wide, incredibly non-textured, and feels very artificial compared to the rest of the environments. Once you actually get to the multiplayer map, it's very clear that this map was made for one thing: multiplayer. And multiplayer is very different from campaign play. Now, on the face of it, it does seem like a cool idea to use one of Halo 3's multiplayer maps and then just convert it for a campaign. It almost seems like a bit of a no-brainer, really, right? But we need to keep in mind that there's actually a couple of hidden problems with doing that. I actually think it's best to take a look at Halo Reach for this example. Halo Reach actually uses a number of its multiplayer maps and its firefight maps for the campaign. These maps, though, are used differently than they are here. Boneyard, I think, presents my argument the best. It's ultimately one of the largest maps in Halo Reach, and it's designed for big multiplayer matches. However, when you play this in campaign, Boneyard only gets used for a small portion of the campaign map, and even then, only a small portion of it is properly used by the AI. The large amount of space in Boneyard can be used by the player to approach the AI's defensive position in a number of different ways, and they can do it however they want. The AI doesn't actually use any of this big wide open space because the developers know that if the AI catches the player in these big open areas, there's very little that the player can do to stop themselves getting fragged. In Halo Prevarication, though, the same consideration isn't taken. In the multiplayer space, these areas work just fine. They're supposed to be risky avenues of approach or places where the players can have duels. Communicating and coordinating with your team so you don't get caught out in any of these open areas is the thing that you should be doing in a multiplayer match. And there is just way too many enemies in this particular section, and there's no cover whatsoever except for the buildings to allow you to hide from them. And guess where the enemies are? They're all in the bloody buildings as well. I don't know necessarily if this was intended by the developers. This might just be because I was playing on Legendary because, you know, I'm not a coward. Either way, I died a lot here, and I think that this was a bit of a difficulty spike that needs to be ironed out and addressed. I also trust with some of my remarks that there just might be limitations with what you can do with the Halo engine modding kit, and that's totally understandable as well. Those are all the big thoughts that I kind of had about gameplay, so let's talk about the story. Story and presentation of narrative is kind of a big thing for me. Right at the start of the mod, we're dumped into what looks to be a UNSC ship, and we're told we have some sort of AI which is going to be guiding us throughout the missions. Right away, this first section doesn't really give us a strong start. It introduces the fact that we have an AI in our head, but it doesn't actually do anything else. It's a very cold open, and it's in comparison to the section just after that where we get in a drop pod and we're dropped straight to Earth. My big critique of this is that the first section is largely pointless. It could be removed and nothing of value would be lost. There may be some sort of technical limitation that I'm not accounting for here, but widely it just slows down the pacing, so I'm not quite sure why it's here. In my opinion, starting in the drop pod with our two exposition marines here would be a lot better pacing. Speaking of our exposition marines here, sometimes story is delivered to us through voice-acted cutscenes, sometimes it's just text. This is a mod project, and I kind of feel it's a bit silly to expect mod projects to have professional voice acting. The text could be better paced at times, and with what voice acting there is, at the very least the voice cast deliver their lines with enthusiasm, which is more than some professional voice actors. Well done, lads. I also kind of feel like some of the dialogue here could be better, and by better I mean more concise more than anything. It's kind of weird. It almost feels like there's sentences here which don't really do or add anything, and there's also just not enough sentences here which actually properly fill us in on what's going on. There's also a couple of real attempts at horror as well. Horror isn't really often seen in Halo. It's done sometimes with the Flood, but not in great quantity. And the Flood offer a really good opportunity for horror as well, so it's really nice to see this being made use of. The horror really reminds me of First Encounter Assault Recon, and I really liked First Encounter Assault Recon, so that's a good thing. My only big problem with these moments is that they don't happen nearly as enough as I'd like. It honestly feels a bit sparse at the moment on the horror front. I don't think they should go overboard with the horror necessarily, but one or two more of these little moments definitely wouldn't go amiss, I don't think. Then again, I'm kind of a crazy person. I went and played Amnesia: The Dark Descent not once, not twice, but 3 times. I really like horror, so I'd probably take that advice with a bit of a pinch of salt. Finally, I can't give the mod enough praise for the atmosphere it manages to generate. The flood-ravaged streets of New Mombasa especially are wonderfully grotesque, and the overall sound design is very well thought out as well. My closing thoughts then. Halo Prevarication is a wonderful mod with maybe 1 or 2 blemishes on its reputation, but I feel that's mostly down to the technical limitations of the Halo modding tools than anything else. At the end of the day, it feels very much like you're playing a passion project. And for the price of free, the only thing that you're sacrificing is your time. And do I feel that Halo Prevarication is worth your time? If you're into Halo, it absolutely is. And honestly, in recent years, with the sheer lack of quality Halo content, this will scratch an itch that you probably have been having for a while. Still not sold? Well, there is an incendiary battle rifle. Just saying. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to give it a like. I'm a small baby channel, man. It really helps. If you want to see more of this kind of content where I give critique for indie games, mods, and other video games, then please feel free to subscribe. I also do tabletop RPG advice, and if you wanted to talk to me about game design live, then you can join me on my Twitch. Thank you very much for watching. Cheerio.